Welcome back to Psychological Depth. In today's episode, we'll be diving into the topic, why women leave relationships and still aren't happy. There's a story being told right now everywhere you look. Articles, podcasts, TikToks, even academic studies. The story goes like this. Women are leaving relationships in record numbers because men aren't good enough. Men don't communicate. Men don't do their share around the house. Men don't meet emotional needs. And so, women, finally empowered and finally awake, are walking out the door toward freedom and happiness. It's a beautiful story, inspiring even. There's just one problem. It doesn't actually end the way they promised. See, if leaving the relationship was the cure, then the women who left should be thriving. They should be glowing. They should be writing thank you letters to their divorce attorneys. But here's what nobody talks about. A huge percentage of women who leave relationships still aren't happy. Not after 6 months, not after a year, not after 3 years. The dissatisfaction follows them like a shadow that got packed in the suitcase. And today, we're going to examine why. Not to attack anyone, not to defend anyone, but to look at something that most people are too afraid to say out loud. What if the problem was never the man? What if the problem is something deeper, something that no amount of leaving will fix? Let's get into it. First, let's acknowledge what's actually happening. Women are initiating divorces at nearly 70% rates in some countries. They're ending long-term relationships. They're walking away from marriages that on paper look fine. No abuse, no cheating, just dissatisfaction, a feeling that something is missing, a sense that this can't be all there is. And the mainstream explanation is very simple. Men are failing. Men got too comfortable. Men stopped courting. Men expect women to work full-time jobs and then come home and do a second shift of cooking, cleaning, and emotional labor. Meanwhile, the man is on the couch watching sports, scratching himself, contributing nothing. According to this narrative, women finally woke up and realized they deserve better. They're not settling anymore. They're choosing themselves. Okay, I've heard this explanation 1,000 times. And look, there's some truth in it. Some men absolutely do get lazy. Some men do stop trying. Some relationships do become unbalanced. I'm not here to deny that. But here's where I start asking uncomfortable questions. If men are the problem and women leave men, then the problem should be solved, right? Basic logic. You have a headache, you take aspirin, headache goes away. You're in an unsatisfying relationship with a lazy man, you leave the lazy man. Satisfaction should arrive. But that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is women leaving relationships and then reporting dissatisfaction in their careers, in their friendships, in their mental health, in their family dynamics, in basically every area of life. And at that point, you have to stop and ask, is it possible the diagnosis was wrong? Let me give you an analogy. Imagine a child is acting out in school. The teacher says he has ADHD. He can't focus. He's disruptive. He needs medication. Makes sense, right? But then you find out this same kid acts perfectly fine at home. He focuses on video games for 6 hours straight. He's calm with his grandparents. He reads books without a problem. Suddenly, the diagnosis looks shaky, because if the problem was truly ADHD, it would show up everywhere, not just in one classroom with one teacher. Same logic applies here. If women's dissatisfaction was caused specifically by men in relationships, then that dissatisfaction should be concentrated in relationships. But it's not. Women report lower satisfaction than men in their careers. Women report lower satisfaction than men in workplace dynamics. Women have significantly higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression, higher rates of medication use for mental health issues. They report more stress, more overwhelm, more burnout. Now, some people will say that's because women are more oppressed in every area of life. The workplace is sexist. The healthcare system ignores women. Society puts impossible demands on them. And sure, some of that's true. But here's a data point that breaks the narrative wide open. Studies have found that in many workplace contexts, women actually report lower satisfaction when working under female leadership compared to male leadership.
Wait, what? If the problem was men and male-dominated systems, then female-led workplaces should be utopia. Women supporting women, no patriarchy, no glass ceiling. Finally, everyone understands each other. But that's not what the data shows. The data shows that the dissatisfaction persists regardless of who's in charge, which tells us something important. The dissatisfaction isn't coming from the man at home or the man at work. The dissatisfaction is coming from somewhere else entirely. Let me tell you what I think is actually happening. And this is going to be uncomfortable, so buckle up. Women, on average, may simply experience more dissatisfaction than men. Not because their lives are worse, not because men have it easier, but because of fundamental differences in how men and women process emotions, form expectations, and evaluate their circumstances. Think about it like this. Two people eat the exact same meal at the exact same restaurant. One person says it was great. The other person says it was disappointing. Same food, same service, same experience. Different internal processing, different expectations going in, different evaluation criteria. Now multiply that across every area of life: career, relationships, health, family, friendships, and you start to see a pattern. Men, generally speaking, tend to have lower expectations, not because they're less ambitious, but because they're socialized differently. A man gets a job that pays the bills and gives him some free time, and he thinks, this is fine, this works. A woman in the same job might think, but is this my passion? Am I reaching my potential? Is this what I was meant to do? Am I making an impact? The job is identical. The internal experience is completely different. And this isn't me making things up. Psychological research consistently shows that women score higher on neuroticism, which isn't an insult, it's a clinical term that refers to the tendency to experience negative emotions more frequently and more intensely. Anxiety, worry, dissatisfaction, rumination. These aren't moral failures, they're psychological tendencies that exist on a spectrum. And women, on average, sit higher on that spectrum. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If a woman has a baseline tendency toward dissatisfaction and she's in a relationship, what does she conclude? She concludes the relationship is the problem. If she's in a job, she concludes the job is the problem. If she's living in a certain city, the city is the problem. The dissatisfaction is real. It's genuinely felt. But the attribution, the explanation for why, that's where the error happens. She leaves the relationship, the dissatisfaction stays. She changes jobs, the dissatisfaction stays. She moves to a new city, the dissatisfaction stays. And then one night, she's lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering why nothing works, why every door she opens leads to another room that looks exactly like the last one. And nobody told her this would happen. Nobody warned her that the thing she was running from was never in the room to begin with. It was in the suitcase she packed. Let me tell you about expectations, because this is where the knife really twists. Women today are raised with a very specific set of promises. You can have it all. You can have the career and the family. You can be independent and supported. You can find a partner who is your best friend, your therapist, your protector, your equal, your cheerleader, and your intellectual match. He should make you laugh, make you feel safe, challenge you to grow, give you space, be emotionally available, financially stable, physically attractive, and spiritually aligned. That's not a partner, that's a fictional character. That's a Build-A-Bear workshop fantasy assembled from rom-coms and Instagram relationship coaches. No human being, male or female, can consistently deliver on that list. But women are taught that if the man doesn't check every box, she's settling. And settling is the greatest sin of modern womanhood. Settling means you've given up. Settling means you've betrayed yourself. So she leaves, not because he was bad, but because he wasn't perfect. And then she enters the dating market looking for someone who checks all the boxes. And you know what? She finds more imperfect humans. Except now they're strangers with their own baggage, their own quirks, their own inability to be everything at once. The guy who's emotionally available is broke. The guy who's financially stable is emotionally distant. The guy who makes her laugh doesn't want kids. The guy who wants kids isn't attractive. It's a carnival of compromises, except now she doesn't have 10 years of shared history to help her tolerate them. Meanwhile, men are socialized with different expectations.
A man is taught, find someone you can tolerate, build something together, and don't complain. That's it. The bar isn't, she must fulfill my every emotional need. The bar is, we don't hate each other and we can function. It's a lower bar.
And paradoxically, a lower bar often leads to higher satisfaction, because satisfaction is just reality minus expectations. If your expectations are modest, reality can easily exceed them. If your expectations are astronomical, reality will always fall short. Here's something that really challenges the narrative. Lesbian relationships. 2 women, no men involved. According to the mainstream explanation, this should be relationship utopia. No toxic masculinity, no emotional labor imbalance with a clueless guy, just 2 women who understand each other deeply. So, what do we see? Lesbian couples have the highest divorce rates of any relationship type, higher than heterosexual couples, significantly higher than gay male couples. Wait, if men are the problem, how does this make sense? 2 women, no men, highest divorce rate. 2 men, no women, lowest divorce rate. The data is screaming something at us, and most people are covering their ears because they don't want to hear it. The presence of women in a relationship correlates with higher rates of dissolution, not because women are bad, but because women may, on average, experience dissatisfaction more acutely, report it more readily, and act on it more decisively. Gay male couples, by contrast, have the lowest divorce rates. 2 people with lower baseline expectations, higher tolerance thresholds, and less tendency to interpret imperfection as betrayal. They don't need the relationship to be a spiritual experience every Tuesday. They need it to work, and it works because they let it work. Now, I'm not saying men are superior. I'm not saying women are broken. I'm saying there's a mismatch between how we talk about relationship dissatisfaction and what's actually causing it. We keep handing women a narrative that says, oh, if you're unhappy, he's the problem. Leave and find happiness elsewhere. And women follow that advice. They leave. And they don't find happiness elsewhere. They find the same dissatisfaction wearing a different outfit. Let me tell you what this looks like in real life. I've talked to countless men who went through divorces. And here's the pattern. She says she's unhappy. He asks what's wrong. She can't quite articulate it. She just feels like something is missing. He tries to change. He does more around the house. He plans dates. He reads books on communication. He goes to therapy. Nothing works because he's trying to fix a problem that doesn't live where she says it lives. It's like she's telling him the roof is leaking and he keeps patching the roof, but the water is actually coming from a broken pipe in the basement. He can patch that roof forever. The house will still flood because the diagnosis was wrong from the beginning. The dissatisfaction isn't about him, it's about a gap between her expectations of what life should feel like and what life actually feels like. And no man, no matter how perfect, can close that gap, because the gap is internal. Here's the painful part. After she leaves, reality hits. The first year might feel like freedom. No compromises, no negotiations. She can eat what she wants, sleep when she wants, live how she wants. But then, the freedom starts to feel like emptiness. The silence that once felt peaceful starts to feel oppressive. The independence that once felt empowering starts to feel like isolation. And slowly she realizes that the relationship wasn't the cage, the relationship was the furniture. And now she's standing in an empty room, wondering why it doesn't feel like home. She starts dating again. And remember, her expectations haven't changed. She still wants the guy who checks every box. But now she's older. She might have kids. Her market position has shifted. The guys who check the most boxes, they're chasing younger women without baggage. The guys who are available, they're available for a reason. She's swimming in a smaller pond with bigger requirements. The math doesn't math. And then one night, maybe it's Tuesday, maybe it's a Saturday, she's sitting alone scrolling through her phone and she sees a photo of her ex. He's with someone new. He looks happy and something twists in her chest because it suddenly occurs to her that he wasn't the problem. He was just a man doing his best, and she left because his best didn't look like the fantasy, and now someone else is enjoying what she threw away. This is the moment that breaks a woman. Not the divorce, not the dating failures. This moment when she realizes she made a trade. She traded something real for something imagined, and the imagined thing never showed up, and the real thing moved on, and she's standing in the middle of her freedom, and it tastes like ash. Now, let me address something before the comments explode. I am not saying women should stay in bad relationships. I am not saying women shouldn't have standards. I am not saying women should just lower their expectations and accept mistreatment. If a relationship is abusive, leave. If a relationship is genuinely destructive, leave. If you've done everything possible and it's still toxic, leave. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about women leaving decent relationships, not abusive, not toxic, just imperfect, because they believe something better is waiting. And for most of them, something better is not waiting. What's waiting is the same dissatisfaction they already had, minus the partner who used to help carry the weight. Here's what I want you to understand. Society has done something cruel to women. It's told them that happiness is their birthright, that they should feel fulfilled, passionate, excited, and content at all times, that any negative emotion is a signal that something is wrong and must be fixed, that discomfort is the universe telling them to leave, to change, to seek something else. And so, women spend their lives chasing a feeling that was never meant to be permanent. Men get a different message. Men are told that life is hard, relationships are work, and your job is to endure and provide. It's not a glamorous message, but it might be a more accurate one because it sets expectations at a level that reality can actually meet. A man expects difficulty and finds difficulty. Expectation met. A woman expects fulfillment and finds difficulty. Expectation violated. Same reality, different experience. Let me give you a framework that might help. I call it the weather versus climate distinction. Your day-to-day emotions are weather. They fluctuate. Some days you feel close to your partner, some days you feel distant. Some days you're annoyed, some days you're grateful. That's normal. That's weather. But the climate, the overall pattern over years, that's what matters. Is the climate generally warm? Do you generally function well together? Do you generally support each other? If yes, then the occasional cold front isn't a reason to move to a different country. But women are often taught to treat weather as climate. One bad week becomes evidence that the relationship is doomed. One argument becomes proof that he doesn't understand her. One period of feeling disconnected becomes a sign that she's with the wrong person. And so she ends relationships during thunderstorms that would have passed in a few days if she'd just waited. Men do the opposite. Men ignore warning signs for way too long. Men stay in relationships that are genuinely broken because they're afraid of change. That's its own problem, but at least men aren't leaving solid relationships because of a bad Tuesday. There's something to be said for a higher tolerance threshold, even if it sometimes tips into denial. Now, here's what I really want to drill in. The societal messaging aimed at women is relentless. From childhood, girls are told they're princesses who deserve Prince Charming. They watch movies where love conquers all, where the right relationship feels like magic, where happiness is just one rom-com meet-cute away. They grow up and start reading articles about how they should never settle. Their friends tell them they deserve better every time they complain. Instagram shows them curated glimpses of perfect relationships that don't actually exist. And then they enter real relationships with real men. Men who burp. Men who forget anniversaries. Men who want sex more than she does or less than she does. Men who get stressed and withdraw. Men who have bad days and don't want to talk about feelings. Men who, in other words, are human. And it feels like a betrayal because nobody told her that normal feels like this. Nobody told her that the one still leaves his socks on the floor. Meanwhile, men's expectations are shaped by a different reality. Men grow up watching their fathers tolerate their mother's moods. Men see relationships as something you maintain, like a car. You don't throw away a car because it needs an oil change. You do the maintenance. The car isn't supposed to make you feel magical. It's supposed to get you from point A to point B. It's utilitarian. And that utilitarian view, while unsexy, is actually more conducive to long-term stability. So what's the solution? I'm not going to pretend there's an easy one, but I think it starts with honesty. Women need to be told the truth about happiness, that it's not a destination you arrive at by making the right choices. It's a fluctuating state that comes and goes regardless of your circumstances, that some amount of dissatisfaction is baseline. It's part of being human, and chasing perfect contentment by constantly changing your external circumstances is a treadmill that never stops.
Women need to understand that the gap between expectations and reality isn't created by their partners. It's created by a culture that sold them a fantasy. And the solution isn't to leave the man who didn't deliver the fantasy. The solution is to mourn the fantasy, accept reality, and find meaning in what's actually possible rather than what was promised. And men need to understand what they're dealing with. When your wife says she's unhappy and she can't explain why, it might not be about you. It might be about an internal process you can't fix. Your job isn't to become a different person. Your job is to be consistent, present, and to stop taking responsibility for emotions that don't belong to you. You can support her, you can't save her from herself. Let me tell you what happens to women who figure this out. They stop running. They realize that every relationship will have problems. Every job will have frustrations. Every city will have things they hate. They realize that happiness isn't about finding the perfect circumstances. It's about adjusting their internal response to imperfect circumstances. They start gratitude practices. They go to therapy to understand their own patterns. They learn to distinguish between genuine problems and normal human dissatisfaction. And some of the smart ones, they go back to the men they left, not because they couldn't survive alone, but because they realized that what they had was actually rare. A man who showed up, a man who tried, a man who, despite all his flaws, was genuinely committed. They realized that they were looking for perfect when good was right in front of them. And good is actually a miracle. Good is actually more than most people ever find. But many women figure this out too late, after the divorce is final, after he's moved on, after years have passed, and then they have to live with the understanding that they made a decision based on a lie the culture told them. They believed that leaving would lead to happiness, and it led to the same dissatisfaction, just with more loneliness and fewer resources. I want to end with something important. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I'm not trying to trap women in unhappy situations. I'm trying to give a more complete picture than the one currently being sold. The picture being sold is you're unhappy, he's the problem, leave and be free. The picture I'm offering is you're unhappy, the cause might be more complicated than you think, leaving might not solve it. Understand yourself before you blow up your life. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. A woman who is prone to dissatisfaction in relationships will also be prone to dissatisfaction outside of relationships. The pattern follows her, and until she addresses the pattern itself, the expectations, the emotional processing, the cultural programming, she will keep searching for an external solution to an internal problem. She'll leave relationship after relationship, job after job, city after city, always believing the next change will finally bring peace, and it never does, because she's looking in the wrong place. The peace she's looking for isn't in a different man, it's in a different relationship with herself, with her expectations, with her definition of enough. And I know that's not as exciting as "leave him, queen, you deserve better," but it might actually be true. So the next time you hear someone say women are leaving relationships because men aren't good enough, ask a question. If men are the problem, why are these women still unhappy after they leave? Why is dissatisfaction following them into every other area of life? Why do lesbian couples, no men involved, have the highest divorce rates? The answers are uncomfortable, but uncomfortable answers are often the only ones worth having. To the men watching this, don't internalize blame that doesn't belong to you. Do your best, be consistent, be present, but understand that you cannot fix something that isn't about you. Her dissatisfaction might be a puzzle that only she can solve. To the women watching this, if any are still here, I'm not your enemy. I'm pointing at a pattern because I've seen it destroy lives. I've seen women leave good men, chasing a feeling that doesn't exist. I've seen them realize the mistake years later when it's too late to undo. I don't want that for you. I want you to ask hard questions before you make irreversible decisions. That's it for today. If you're going through a divorce or separation, I have more videos that go deeper into the dynamics of distancing, attraction, and what actually works when you're trying to navigate this territory. In the comments, tell me, have you seen this pattern? Have you watched a woman leave a decent relationship chasing something better only to end up worse? Share the story, not to mock, not to gloat, but because the more we understand this pattern, the fewer people have to live through it.